It's just such a joy to be here in this place I love with all these people I love. And our call to worship this morning is from The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining, and the grass was very green. But Gandalf looked at him from under long, bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning? Or mean that it is a good morning, whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good this morning? Or that it is a morning to be good on?" "All of them at once," said Bilbo. "And a very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors, into the bargain." "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might try the hill or across the water." By this, Bilbo meant that the conversation was at an end. "What a lot of things you do use good morning for," said Gandalf. "Now you mean that you want to get rid of me, and that it won't be good until I'm off." Our meditation is from the musician Amy Mann. "The moth don't care when he sees the flame. He might get burned, but he's in the game. And once he's in, he can't go back. He'll beat his wings till he turns them black. No, the moth don't care when he sees the flame. The moth don't care if the flame is real, 'cause flame and moth got a sweetheart deal. And nothing fuels a good flirtation like need and anger and desperation. No, the moth don't care if the flame is real."
I like doing sermon series, and I was trying to think whether I would be brave enough to do a series using as my text various fairy tales. And I decided, yes, I was brave enough to do that. And I wish I hadn't now. Because fairy tales are strange, and they end badly, a lot of them. They're not sweet. Jung said a fairy tale is the dream of a collective mind. So a whole culture will have a dream that is their folk tale or their fairy tale. And so I like to use fairy tales. I get asked a lot to teach groups of UU ministers about how to preach better. And one of the things that I do is use fairy tales to show how we can tell a story. And at the end, we all in groups tell the story that we've been assigned. And they tend to sweeten up the stories quite a bit. And I know that it's because they're better people than I, or at least just more sweet and earnest than I. And I'm sorry y'all didn't get one of those, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story of the three little pigs end with the three pigs and the wolf gathered around the dinner table eating a nice vegetarian stew. But I'm going to tell you the real story in as much as we have it. It may be a fragment, and people tell this story any number of ways. It's the story of the red shoes, and the most famous version is Hans Christian Andersen's version of the story. These stories, like the ones the Grimm brothers gathered, are from mostly from Huguenot women who had come to the part of Germany where the Grimm brothers lived, and they were, some of them well-educated and some were less well-educated maids in people's houses there. But these women had stories that some people say are just women's stories, and other people say, no, they're the stories of the culture. Some people say the stories were meant to be told in series, which is sometimes why they feel like they don't have a good ending. But other times they just don't have a good ending because they arose from a time in the culture of Europe where there were things like the Black Plague and the Crusades and the Inquisition, and life was kind of rough. So there was a girl whose parents had died, and she was penniless, and she had to make her own way in the world. She wore rags, and she foraged for food in the forest. And she would often come to where she slept, cold and hungry and shivering in the dark. This girl had gathered scraps of cloth where she could, and she had sewn them herself by hand into a pair of shoes and dyed those shoes red with the juice of berries. She loved those red shoes. They were handmade, but in them she felt special and rich. They were her shoes, her identity. She was the girl in the red shoes. One day as she was walking home, an enormous gilded carriage screeched to a halt right next to her, and an elderly lady leaned out and said, "Girl, come here. I am going to take you home with me, and I am going to bathe you and dress you and feed you, and you are going to be fine. You're going to be rich. Come be my ward." So the girl got into the carriage, and the servants put her in the bathtub and washed her hair and combed it and put a blue ribbon in her hair and gave her clean underthings and white tights and black shoes and a gray dress, and everything was beautiful and clean. And she said to the lady, "But where are my other clothes?" And the lady said, "Oh, those filthy things. I threw them in the fire." "Well, what about my shoes, my red shoes?" "Oh, those were ludicrous shoes. They went in the fire as well." Well, the time came when the girl needed some new shoes, and the lady took her to the cobbler. The lady was getting older, and her eyesight was failing. In the cobbler's store were some shoes that had been returned because they weren't quite the right size for the person they'd been made for. They were bright red, shiny like an apple. And the girl said, "May I try those shoes on?" And the cobbler said, "Certainly," and winked at her because he knew the old lady couldn't tell what color they were. Sure enough, they bought those shoes and took them home, and it was time for the girl to be confirmed at church on the Day of the Innocents. And they went to church, and she wore her red shoes. She could barely hear the sermon because of the shoes. She was just turning them this way and that, seeing how good her feet looked in them. She could barely hear the choir, even though it was fabulous. And she passed the whole service in a dream of joy. Hans Christian Andersen said, vanity, in a dream of vanity with her red shoes. And you know at coffee hour, the old lady got an earful of what those shoes looked like, and how could she, and how improper it was for you to wear red shoes at all at that age, much less to church. So the old lady said when they got home, "You must never wear these shoes again, never." And she put them away in the closet on a shelf. Well, the next time they went to church together, the girl knew the old lady couldn't really see them. And she went to the closet and got the shoes out and wore them again. Well, you know what happened. Everybody said, "Again, your ward is shameless. She's wearing these red shoes to church." And the old lady said, "Oh, how can you embarrass me and humiliate me? So I'm putting them on a higher shelf in the closet." The next time they went to church, the girl wore the red shoes again. And when they came out from the service, there was an old soldier there with a broken body, twisted, with using crutches. And he said, "Girl, what beautiful shoes you have. Come here." Okay, in fairy tales, when someone says, "Come here," don't ever do it. It's like going up the stairs like the white girls do to see what noise it is up there in a horror movie. Don't go. Anyway, the soldier goes, "Come here. What beautiful dancing shoes. Let me dust them off for you." And he dusts her shoes off and then smacks the bottom of the shoes and said, "You're going to dance." And her feet start moving. The shoe that's even in his hand starts moving, and her other foot on the ground starts to move. And she starts to dance and kick and pirouette, and she's thrilled because dancing is cool, but not at church. Not in Hans Christian Andersen's day and time, not at the Lutheran church. Not okay. And the old lady says, "Oh, stop embarrassing me this way," and says to her footman, "Catch her and take those shoes off." And the footman grabs the girl, and the girl's shoes are still kicking, and the footman's hat is knocked askew, and the old lady's hat is knocked askew. But finally, the footman gets the shoes off, and the girl's feet calm down. And they go home, and the lady says, "Put those shoes on the highest shelf there is." Then the old lady falls ill. She's in her bed. She's gone completely blind. She's very sick. And the girl just goes to visit the shoes, just to see them. She opens the closet and sees them glowing on the top shelf. And her look becomes a gaze, and her gaze becomes an obsession. And her obsession says, "I have to put those shoes on my feet. Maybe I'll just hold them. I'll just hold them." And she climbs all the way up to hold the shoes, and soon as you know it, the shoes are on her feet, and her feet start to dance. And she dances down the hall. She dances a minuet, and then she dances a gavotte, and then she dances a waltz, and she's waltzing out the door and down the road. And she starts worrying only when she wants to go to the right, and the shoes take her to the left. And she wants to go down the middle of the road, and the shoes dance her backwards. And she thinks, uh-oh. So she heads for the church because there is where she might find some help, she thinks. But there's a spirit of dread that meets her in the road and says, "You will dance until the flesh falls off of your bones. And you will dance until you are nothing but entrails dancing. And you will dance through the village, and you will bang on the door of every house 3 times until they come out to see you and are horrified at what they could possibly become if they are as vain and foolish as you." And lo, she does that very thing and dances across the fields and dances for days. And she dances not beautiful dances, but terrible, nightmarish dances. And finally, she comes back around by her house, and she sees a bunch of people there. And the old lady is gone, and she hasn't been there. And she's just dancing and can't go pay her respects. And she's horrified at this. And she thinks she would rather die. And she gets thin and thinner and paler and more miserable, and she's crying out while she's dancing. And she dances, she decides, "I'm going to see if the shoes will let me dance toward the forest because I'm so tired of this. I'm so exhausted. I'm going to go see the executioner and see if he can do anything for me." And she goes toward the executioner's cabin, and the axe on the executioner's wall hanging there starts to hum and vibrate because it can feel her coming. And she bangs on the executioner's door and says, "You must help me. I don't care how you do it. You may just kill me. I cannot go on like this anymore." And he says, "I don't want to kill you. Let me just see if I can cut the straps of these shoes." And he cuts the straps, but they stick on her feet, and she's still dancing. And she says, "Just kill me." And he says, "I'm not going to kill you. I don't want to kill you. I might have to chop your feet off." And she says, "Do it." So he does it, and her feet go dancing over the hill and away in the shoes. And she suffers, of course, but he helps her use some crutches, and she works Hans Christian Andersen says, as a servant in people's homes. Humble and much more godly than she was before. Okay. Aside from the fact that I don't think you could really work as a servant with no feet. Although it's possible, I know it's all symbolic, so I shouldn't get hung up on literal details. And that's how I got in trouble with the Bible. But how could, anyway. So in Hans Christian Andersen's sort of dour Scandinavian Lutheran, nothing against Scandinavians at all, but that Lutheranism can be kind of dour. Maybe the sun doesn't shine and it's a combination of Martin Luther and no sunshine, I don't know. But he says her vanity took her away from God, and she had to cut it off in order to become humble and godly again. So don't be vain. Mm-hmm. And what I think is that your interpretation of a scripture or a story of any kind is quite dependent on your own culture and your own assumptions and values that you already have. And so it means more than one thing, don't you think? I mean, my Republican sister reads the news and watches TV and interprets it all in a Republican way, which is fine. Very differently from how I read the news and watch TV and interpret it in sort of a left of center way. She cannot understand how I get this from the story. I can't understand how she gets that from the story, and yet we both agree that that dress is white and gold. But people who disagree really can disagree vehemently, and they can really completely not understand how you could have your position, which differs from theirs. It's almost outrageous how you're shaking my world. How can you even see black and blue? And so people almost come to blows about differences. So I think maybe we can take a deep breath and look at different ways of interpreting this story. Now, the Jungians say that you have your handmade life. You have your red shoes, the beauty that you've created for yourself, your value system that you stand in. And if you are tempted to give it away for a more comfortable life, or a richer life, or a faster, more shiny life, that sets up a hunger in you. If you've given away your natural, beautiful, instinctual self to live with in a culture that says, dress in this gray dress with these white stockings and these black shoes, and sit down and be quiet and don't ask questions, and come to church every Sunday with the people who don't think it's cool to wear red shoes, and be sweet and don't cry. That kind of stricture of your natural self. I'm not saying be a hooligan and don't have good manners, but that kind of sitting there and being the person someone else wants you to be can set up a famine, a hunger inside, and you take whatever you can to fill that up. And so the girl sees these shiny red shoes, and they're kind of like her old shoes, only shinier. It's kind of like, feels like love, only it's heroin. And you put these shoes on, and then you meet that person who's going to give you that slap that puts you out of control. That person who is kind of wanting to curse you for some reason and says, here, try this. Just, those shoes will dance. You can be a good dancer in those shoes. Let's just start dancing. And then you dance, and then finally you go, oh my goodness, this is terrible. And then you get the shoes off, and they get put in the closet, and you think, I'm just going to look at them. I'm just going to hold them. Now they're on my feet again. Now I can't control where I go. And we take those things that are shiny, we take those things that are artificially filling that famine in us, like too much work or a relationship that we're obsessed with, or alcohol or drugs or any number of things that we take to fill that hunger rather than getting our natural beauty back, our natural life, our instinctive value system back, and we can continue to do what other people say we should do while filling our hunger with this other stuff we have to sneak until finally it's out of control. And we're completely dying from this thing that we thought would keep us alive. And in order to get rid of that thing, you have to cut it off. You have to just stop. Okay, so another interpretation, I think, which could be a little bit more, I would call it paganish, whereas maybe you're amongst people now who think red shoes are cool, and red shoes are lovely, and maybe you're in a church where nobody's going to say, I can't believe you're wearing red shoes in church. Maybe people are going to go, nice shoes. And so maybe your red shoes are like your natural gifts. Maybe having your natural gifts and then trying to fast track them is what gets your life out of control. Like, you like to sing, you have a good band, and suddenly Clive Davis goes, I'll sign you to my record company. Only you have to lose 40 pounds, and here's some cocaine that'll help you. And I need you to be really nice to that executive over there because he's got your career in his hands. And suddenly you're not a person you recognize anymore. Maybe you love sports, and then you get signed, and you have to do things you didn't think you should have to do in order to get signed. Or maybe you're in a law firm that you love the work, and then you find out there's this seamy underside of this particular firm where they're laundering money for the mob. And when you try, wait a minute, that's that movie. Maybe you're a really good drummer and you go to music school and then you get in the band and then you find out the band is run by this crazy guy who throws stuff at you. Whiplash is a perfect red shoes movie. Or maybe the red shoes are just your gifts. And this is the thing. If you're a very gifted person, especially in the arts, your gifts will run you ragged because you are trying for excellence all the time, and whatever you do in your art or in your writing or in your music, whatever you do doesn't satisfy you. So you're striving for excellence. Everything you do, people go, oh, that's so good. And you go, no, it's not. I know what's good. And you can't stop doing it. You have to do it for the rest of your life and be dissatisfied for the rest of your life, while everybody else around you is so stupid that they think you're good. And you'll just dance in your gifts till you die. But it's good too, because you're dancing in your gifts. I don't know what the story means. I'm just telling you it can mean a lot of different things. And I'm telling you that fundamentalists of all kinds can interpret their own scriptures, whether they be Muslim or Christian, in order to say, do horrible things in the name of this religion of peace. If you're a fundamentalist Christian, you're told to throw your gay children out of the house onto the street because that's more loving to them than accepting their gay lifestyle and furthering the gay agenda. Or if you're a radicalized Muslim, you're told that in this religion of peace, sometimes you have to behead people in order to rid the world of people who don't agree with your religion. People disagree, and they think the people who don't agree with them should be wiped out. I mean, have you seen this debate about black and blue and white and gold? People are really mad at each other. It's craziness. So what I'm saying is there's room for a lot of different interpretations. There are many ways to God. This tale might just mean dance your own dance. Don't dance somebody else's dance. And if you find yourself dancing somebody else's dance in somebody else's shoes, then stop and do what you can to get your own dance back. Your soul is a constant pulse of wholeness. There's no way you can destroy it, and it will guide you, your inner wisdom. If you listen to it, you will be guided back to the beauty that you need to be walking and dancing in.